my life's journey. Here we are again, and I'm going to go through a few highlights that quite possibly are not written in the book, but here we are on video. And you know, I'm getting on now, and as I'm winding up in this lifetime, at least I will have some tangible things to say about Srila Prabhupada. And I mean, I came in contact with the devotees way back in 1968-69 in different locations, as I've explained in my book, which actually were preparing me for the actual plunge into Krishna consciousness and ISKCON in 1972. So, you know, that's the way it works. You know, you can't just take up spiritual life just by the click of a finger. It's a gradual process, and as stepping stones on the mystical path, they help everybody, even though we're not always aware of it. So by the time I was materially finished with enjoying the material world and frustrated from the material world, I turned to spiritual life in a positive way. And not out of desperation, but out of seeking a higher alternative. So by 1972, when I joined, I came in contact directly with the first devotees. Balakrishna was the one that's all explained in the book, but he was a great mentor and a friend, because obviously he was the first devotee that I physically had interaction with. And he was a wonderful cook. He was a great, you know, chef. I mean, I still can remember the feast that he made on Balram's appearance day and Nrsingadev's appearance day and all those wonderful feasts. Yeah, all traditional Srila Prabhupada feasts. They were absolutely amazing. After all the activities on Sankirtan, which are well documented in the book, and book distribution, and all the wonderful experiences that I had within the first year, 72 to 73, we, that means Dharmatma Ganapati and I and a few other devotees, were in New Vrindavan for just the run-up to Jamastami, and I heard through, you know, Kirtan and other devotees there that Srila Prabhupada was in Bhaktivedanta Manor. So, you know, I did a reverse charge call to my parents. Being a brahmachari, I obviously didn't have any money. And I explained to them that I wanted to come and visit Bhaktivedanta Manor, that George Harrison had donated the place just recently in the last few months, and my spiritual master, which I have never physically seen, but have a lot of affection for, I wanted to come there. So they funded the return ticket from Pittsburgh via Boston to Heathrow, London Heathrow, return for a few weeks. Because I was a loyal devotee and I wanted to come back and keep my commitment to the Sankirtan devotees and return. I didn't want to just use the excuse to leave them. So I boarded the flight, and I had a photograph of Srila Prabhupada on my front table there in the cabin, economy section. I sat next to the window. I had Srila Prabhupada's photograph there. He was holding a danda. Very beautiful photograph, and I obviously was fasting. It was Jamastami in the air. I think it must have taken 5 to 8 hours, something like that, in flight. I chanted 64 rounds. And so, you know, my consciousness was great. By the time I arrived the next day, it was Vyasa Puja. So the wonderful experiences that I had during that time on Vyasa Puja, they're absolutely hair-raising experiences. Subtle, but absolutely hair-raising. They're described, and there's a video link which which I explain in more detail. So I won't spoil it, you can read it and you can see the other video as well. I mean, having said this about my parents, my mother and father, my mother in particular, funding and coming to see Srila Prabhupada on his Vyasa Puja day, she was performing a Gyanta Sakriti. It's a Sanskrit terminology for doing devotional service without knowledge. So when you engage somebody who actually doesn't know the full story, then they are getting spiritual benefit from their activities. And you know, I think that now she's still alive, she's 90 plus, and I pray to Krishna that she will get the benefit of all the things, positive things that she did for Srila Prabhupada, and that is, you have to read the book because it's, I don't want to spoil it. 1975, when we were in South Africa, I say we, a small band of devotees, Pusta Krishna, His Holiness Pusta Krishna Swami asked me to come and accompany him there. So I sadly left the BBT Travelling Airport Sankirtan Party and went to South Africa to expand book distribution, which I did, and it was very successful. It was almost as if I was being rewarded, because this was a haven for book distribution. You didn't have to wear a wig, you didn't have to put on karmi clothes necessarily, unless you were going in awkward places. You could distribute the book on the merit of the book. And people would give a donation easily on the basis of what you were trying to say. They had no hang-ups. So South Africa, in that particular time in history, was amazing. And all the details of that are in the book. Later that year, we were praying and hoping against hope to bring Srila Prabhupada, and many of his former secretaries were pulling him here and pulling him there and scaremongering some of the devotees. Some Americans were saying, Swami, don't go to South Africa, it's a racist country, it's a fascist country, if you go there you'll be put in jail. Many American tourists who have gone there recently, they were incarcerated in jail for not having their paperwork properly in order. Don't go there. So there was a lot of scaremongering, but Srila Prabhupada, you know, was undeterred. Undeterred. He was single-minded and determined to bring Krishna consciousness to the shores of South Africa, and that's what he did. So he arrived, and so that scaremongering didn't work with Srila Prabhupada. Did not work. The details of his tour in South Africa, again, they're in the book. And there are videos that explicitly document his tour. And that footage I found disregarded. It was Super 8 millimeter. I was dumped in a cowshed somewhere, and I retrieved it, spliced it up and sent it to America, which again, it was almost lost for another 10 years. But eventually it was digitalized, and I have the footage by the grace of Yadubharan Nishangananda as a link in the book. I believe it was 1976, in fact. I'd been to Mayapur originally in 75 when I met Pusta Krishna, and he took me and sent me to South Africa, but the following year I came and we presented Srila Prabhupada with a card with an overland journey from Europe. But while I was there at the Mayapur festival, I attended the temple president's meeting and with the GBCs and everything. And I witnessed so many different things. But one occasion, Pragosh, my godbrother from America, he asked me if I would guard Srila Prabhupada's quarters and guard Srila Prabhupada as his personal security guard for that evening, and I gladly took the opportunity to do that. So that was in the Lotus Building, second floor. Prabhupada had his quarters, and by 9, 10 o'clock, I went there by 9, by 10 o'clock everything was winding up. Maybe Srila Prabhupada stayed up to 10 or so. But everything went quiet by 11 o'clock. And then by 1:30 in the morning, everything was very quiet. It was a Gaur Purnima evening, the moon was was almost completely full. As it turned over midnight, Srila Prabhupada appeared on the veranda. And there he was in his lungi, his saffron silk lungi, and he didn't come straight to me. He walked to the other end of the hallway and he looked at the yoga pith, and he was doing some little meditation there, and then he slowly came back and I offered my dandavats to him, prostrated obeisances, and he asked me my name. And then he went into his room and he started translating Srimad Bhagavatam. So then maybe about 40 minutes later, 20 minutes later, a very short period of time, he came and he requested me. I think he rang his bell and I went there. And he said, this life members at the rear of the side of his room, the life members and patrons that have donated sizable amounts, or for whatever reason they were sleeping with their bedrolls casually on the veranda. And one particular gentleman was snoring terribly. So Prabhupada said, stop that. So I went back there, got the man, woke him up and explained. Swamiji says, please do not make disturbance, he's trying to work and you're a disturbance. So he understood, and then that was it. So the next few years, many things are described in chronological order in the book. But at one stage in 1979, I've been given the task of being the manager at Govinda's restaurant in Juhu Beach, Bombay. And during that 1 year that I was there, many things had transpired. But my wife gave birth to a second boy. We named him Ganeshan. And once he was a few weeks old, I approached Petit Pavan, my godbrother, who used to take care of the library there. He was a Sanskrit. He was a very learned man, actually, not just a Sanskrit. He was learned in all areas of Vedic understanding. So he found the best astrologer in Bombay for making astrological charts, because in those days there were no computers. So he brought a Mr. Makwani, who came directly to the restaurant. He came to the library, and he explained to me that your child, and he explained what type of names I can use to name him, which are the best sounding names, Ganja, all these different things according to Shastra. But he says, this child will be like a sannyasi his entire life. And that was an amazing blessing to have a boy like that. Later on in that same year, 1979, I was petitioned by Anutama, my godbrother, the car dealer, not the media man. He asked me, because he was transporting a vehicle and funds to Bombay from the ladies' travelling Sankirtan party from Canada. So he wanted, I knew the roads. I'd already done the overland trip twice, once with Prabhupada's car and once prior to becoming a devotee. So I volunteered. So I got on the ferry, got over to Germany and met him at Frankfurt, where he was attending the Govardhan Puja, and also he had purchased a van. It was a Mercedes, typical medium-sized van, long wheelbase, diesel, which he had got at a reasonable price, because he was a car dealer, he knew the road, he knew what to get. So in the back of the van was a Giriraj and a Govardhan hill and all the laddus. It was amazing, along with his luggage and whatever. We took off on the road, and after about 10 days we got into Iran. Less than 10 days, I would say, maybe a week. We got into Iran fairly quick. And after we were exhausted at 2 o'clock in the morning, I had to pull over just outside of Tehran. I was sleeping in the cab in the front, he was sleeping in the back, and bang, 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 bang. I thought it was the police or something, but it was like a terrorist, a robber. So I opened the door, boom, they put a gun straight to my head. Dollar, dollar, dollar. And then they ransacked the cab, throwing my luggage, all my children's photographs, and then searching, and then Anutava was completely petrified. I said, don't give them the Lakshmi. I kept saying that, don't give them the Lakshmi. But he was petrified, so he surrendered several $1,000s worth of Sankirtan collection. And what could you do? Our lives were at stake. They may well have killed us and then searched for it had he not surrendered the money. Anyway, we went further on after making the complaint to the police, but that didn't work, and the magistrates' court, they were just a joke. Nobody believed us, what happened. But we went to the Tehran temple, and Maitreya Rishi took care of us. I think he may have even given us a little money to get to Delhi. So we continued on. And that was the end of that little adventure. But the time we got into India, and the vehicle finally got to Bombay, and I went down there too. We were all frightened. We got into the Bombay, we heard the devotees were not at the Juhu temple. They weren't at the Juhu temple, they were in the magistrate's court downtown, and they'd all been acquitted of the big court murder charges. They had all been acquitted as we arrived. It was amazing. Mahabodhi was there, and Giriraj Swami was there, Sridhar Swami was there, all the devotees who were accused were there, they were all acquitted, and it was a wonderful occasion. So, yeah, so we're going to get into the 80s now. There are many things in the book which describe some of the things in the 80s, but one thing that I haven't mentioned, I'm going to explain right now, is during the time I was in Soho as running the bookshop, as the manager there, and Yadubara used to frequently come through, and he had requested me specifically to help him research and find out about the recorded footage of Srila Prabhupada installing Radha-Landa Ishwara deities, which he wanted to acquire for his series. And so I did some research, he did some research, and finally I notified him that they had it recorded. So I got on a train and took him down to West London, to Shepherd's Bush, where the BBC headquarters are. We went to the archives, which you could in those days. Can't do that now, but I went there with him. And the man told us, we have what you want. It's described in the indexing, but we don't have the footage. It's mysteriously gone adrift. So a bit disappointed. We kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and finally the man told us, he said, it's been sold on, but this is unofficial, so you can't mention it, but it's been sold to Viz News. So we got in contact with Viz News, and they agreed to sell it to us for a bargain price of £500, according to their calculation. Historical footages are worth a lot of money. So we purchased it, and that was used as an historical event in the history of ISKCON. At the end of the 80s, I was blessed, while I was working in Bhaktivedanta Manor in particular, to have been offered the service of taking care of His Holiness Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj. And he had been travelling with his troupe tirelessly in the mid-England, Midlands, Northampton, with big venues, big organised venues. And were very, very successful. So he decided that he would share the troupe with the devotees, and he came to the manor and they housed the devotees, the Manipur dancers, the martial arts, the ladies, the men, everybody. There was quite a big group of them. And I was doing all the little tasks to back him up and to get the show on the road, and it was a wonderful experience, serving such a saintly person. Of course, everything went down fantastic with the devotees. There was a beautiful turnout to watch the programs. It was wonderful. And later on, we'll move on, later on, I also had and not that I pick and choose God brothers, but Sadhaputta had always approached me. He was a friend of mine. He was a very learned man, and I always took him and showed him where to get scientific literature from the books of India near the British Museum, where he purchased several $100s worth of literature without having to go all the way to India. And then on that particular occasion, he told me, Ritter, you know, I'm here and I'm working with the Mayapur project, the planetarium, but sometimes I get bored, I want to preach. Please hook me up with some scientific people. So I arranged a very broad-minded physicist, a Jewish man from Finchley in London, in a well-to-do area, who was very respectful and well-known. So we went to his residence, we sat in his little office, and it was a small little, as I recall, small little office, and they were having a dialogue on their scientific physics and this and that, and then the gentleman mentioned to Sariputta, just out of the blue, he said, my fellow colleagues, I mean, we were talking about all different subject matters, I mean, absolutely amazing stuff, which I won't talk about now. But on this particular occasion, at that moment, he said, my colleagues in Moscow, my fellow physicists, are raving about a book called Mechanistic, Non-Mechanistic Science. It's all the rave in Russia, in the USSR. And it's written by, and he tried to recall it, he said, Dr. Richard Thompson. Dr. Richard L. Thompson. So Sariputta looked at him, and he's in amazement, he said, but I am Dr. Richard Thompson. And that was amazing. I'm so happy to have taken him.